You really think you can just set me up and get away with it? Amanda's voice was calm, unwavering. The room froze. Jason Collins, a towering figure with an air of arrogance, stood in the center of the high-rise office, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, looking every bit the powerful businessman he was. The air was thick with tension as his fingers gripped the back of the chair, his jaw clenched, but Amanda's words hung in the air like a challenge he hadn't expected. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. If anything, she seemed almost too calm for someone who had just been arrested on suspicion of drug trafficking. The police had barged into her apartment hours earlier, searching her place without a warrant, accusing her of crimes she hadn't committed. They had planted the evidence, a packet of drugs hidden in the back of her kitchen cabinet, neatly wrapped as if it were a gift waiting to be unwrapped. But Amanda knew better. She knew exactly what was happening. Jason, the millionaire who owned half the city, thought he could use his wealth and influence to get rid of her. But Amanda had been playing her cards carefully, biding her time. She wasn't just any hotel receptionist. She was someone who had spent years studying law, working undercover for the FBI, and waiting for the right moment to take down someone like Jason Collins. And that moment had finally arrived. You really think you've won, don't you? Jason sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. He believed Amanda was a simple woman, a woman with no power, no connections, someone who would crumble under the weight of his accusations. He couldn't have been more wrong. Amanda stood there, her back straight, her hands clasped in front of her, the calm in her demeanor only fueling Jason's growing frustration. She had done nothing wrong. She had always been the model employee, the quiet worker who kept her head down, never causing trouble. Yet, somehow, Jason had decided she was a threat. He had decided that she would be the perfect pawn in his game to cover up his own shady dealings. Jason had no idea what he had gotten himself into. As the tension mounted in the room, Amanda's phone buzzed quietly in her pocket. She didn't even need to look at it to know what it was. It was the message from her contact at the FBI. She had sent them a tip earlier that morning, and now they were ready. She had been working with them for months, gathering information on Jason's illegal activities. The moment she had seen the packet of drugs planted in her apartment, she knew it was time to strike. Jason was so sure of his victory that he didn't see her plan coming. He didn't see her calm exterior hiding the storm of preparation and strategy that had been building for months. You can't even imagine how wrong you are, Amanda said softly, her voice steady as she reached for her phone and sent the final message to her FBI contact. She watched Jason's face twist with confusion, his eyes narrowing as the realization started to sink in. He had underestimated her. What do you mean by that? Jason asked, his voice now tinged with uncertainty. Amanda didn't respond right away. Instead, she let the silence linger, watching as the tension in Jason's posture began to crack. The door behind them opened, and two FBI agents stepped into the room. One was a tall man with dark hair, the other a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. Without a word, the agents walked past Jason, who was now visibly rattled, and straight to Amanda. The look on Jason's face shifted from smug confidence to confusion, then to panic. The agents flashed their badges, and without a second glance, they began to inspect the evidence Jason had so carefully planted. What's going on here? Jason demanded, his voice rising. You can't do this. I know the mayor. I'll have you both fired. The agents didn't even look at him. They were too focused on Amanda, who was now standing taller than ever before. She had no need to say a word. The FBI agents were already handling the situation. Jason's empire was crumbling, and it was all happening because he had thought he could push Amanda around. He had thought she was just a pawn, an easy target. But in that moment, he realized just how wrong he had been. Amanda had been playing him all along. She was the one in control now, and Jason knew there was nothing he could do to stop it. As the agents began to collect the evidence, Jason's world began to unravel. His wealth, his connections, his power, none of it mattered anymore. All that mattered now was the truth. And the truth was about to come crashing down around him. Amanda gave Jason one last, knowing glance. You were never in control, Jason. I was. And with that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Jason standing there, frozen in the chaos of his own making. As Amanda stepped out of the room, the heavy door closing behind her with a soft thud, the adrenaline in her veins finally started to subside. She could feel the weight of the situation lifting, but only just. She wasn't free yet, not completely. The FBI agents had the evidence they needed, but there was still work to be done. She walked down the sleek, marble hallway, her heels clicking softly with each step. It was late in the evening, and the building was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of the air conditioning. Her mind raced as she replayed the events of the past hour. The shock on Jason's face had been almost worth the entire ordeal. He had been so confident, so sure of himself, but now he was nothing more than a puppet in her hands. She wasn't just a receptionist. She wasn't just some woman with a troubled past. She had used his own arrogance against him, and now his empire was starting to crumble. Amanda couldn't help but smile, the corners of her lips lifting ever so slightly. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about proving herself. It was about justice. The truth was out now, and there was no going back. The FBI had all the pieces they needed to take down Jason Collins for good. She knew it was only a matter of time before the authorities moved in and everything Jason had worked for would come crashing down. But even though the battle was won, Amanda couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this was just the beginning. She had made a lot of enemies along the way, and Jason was just one of many. As she reached the elevator, the door slid open, and she stepped inside. The soft ding of the elevator was the only sound as she pressed the button for the parking garage. Her heart was still racing, her pulse quickening as the elevator descended. She tried to steady her breath, but her mind kept returning to the moments she had spent in that conference room. The fear, the uncertainty, the way Jason had tried to manipulate her. And yet, here she was. She had stayed calm, stayed composed, even when everything around her was falling apart. She had known all along that she was more than just a hotel receptionist. She had known that, deep down, she was capable of more. As the elevator came to a stop, the doors opened, and Amanda stepped out into the dimly lit garage. Her car was parked in the far corner, a sleek black sedan that looked out of place in the otherwise empty space. She made her way toward it, her footsteps echoing in the silence. When she reached the car, she paused for a moment, taking a deep breath before sliding into the driver's seat. The familiar scent of leather and air freshener filled her senses as she started the engine. The soft purr of the car's engine was comforting, almost like a reassurance that everything was going to be okay. But she knew better than to believe it would be that simple. There was still much to be done, and Jason wasn't the only one she had to worry about. As she drove out of the parking garage and onto the quiet streets of the city, Amanda's thoughts turned to the future. She had made a name for herself, not just in the FBI, but in the world that she had once been a part of, the world where people like Jason held all the power. Now, things were different. She had a purpose. She had a mission. And nothing, not even the power of men like Jason, would stand in her way. The night air was cool as she navigated the streets, the city lights casting a soft glow against the dark sky. The world seemed peaceful, almost serene, but Amanda knew better. She had been part of this world for too long to believe in its calm exterior. There was always something lurking beneath the surface, something dark and dangerous waiting to rise. As she made her way toward her apartment, she glanced at the rearview mirror, her eyes narrowing as she saw a black SUV tailing her. Her heart skipped a beat, but she remained calm. This wasn't the first time she had been followed. She had anticipated this. Whoever was in that car didn't know who they were dealing with. Amanda's fingers tightened on the steering wheel as she made a quick turn, weaving through the streets in a series of sharp, practiced movements. She had been trained for this. She had learned how to lose a tail, how to blend in when necessary. And tonight, she was ready. As she pulled into a quiet side street and slowed the car to a stop, the SUV passed by without noticing. Amanda exhaled slowly, allowing herself a brief moment of relief. She wasn't safe yet, but she had bought herself a little time. She knew the game wasn't over. Jason Collins might be out of the picture, but there were always others, always more battles to fight. As she parked the car in front of her building, Amanda leaned back in the seat, closing her eyes for a moment. The weight of the day had finally caught up with her, and for the first time in hours, she allowed herself to relax. She wasn't just a woman who had been framed. She was an agent, a fighter, and the road ahead would be one of constant vigilance. But for now, she could rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, and Amanda would face them head-on, just like she always had. As Amanda entered her apartment, the door clicked softly behind her, locking automatically. She had barely crossed the threshold when her phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with an incoming call. The number was unknown, but the area code was familiar. Her heart raced just a little as she picked up the phone. "Hello," she answered, her voice calm but alert. On the other end, there was a brief pause before a voice she recognized spoke. "It's me, Jackson." Amanda's body stiffened at the sound of his name. She had been expecting something like this, but hearing it still sent a chill down her spine. Jason Collins, Jackson to those who thought they knew him, wasn't the type to let things go easily. He had too much pride, too many connections, to just let his plans fall apart without trying to claw his way back into power. "I know what you did," Jason continued, his voice low and threatening. "You think you've won, but this is far from over. You've made a big mistake, Amanda." Amanda's grip tightened on the phone, but she kept her tone level. "I'm not the one who made the mistake here, Jason," she replied. "You should have known better than to underestimate me. Now you're the one facing the consequences." Jason let out a sharp laugh, the sound dark and mocking. "Consequences? You think this is over? I've got people who will make your life a living hell. This isn't the last you'll hear from me." Amanda felt her stomach twist, but she didn't let it show. She had been prepared for this, for Jason to come after her once he realized how badly he'd miscalculated. But she wasn't afraid. She wasn't the same person she had been before she joined the FBI. She wasn't the same person who had been willing to settle for a life working behind a desk in a hotel lobby. She had learned how to survive, how to fight, how to use the system against those who thought they could control it. "I don't think you understand, Jason," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. "I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of your threats. And I'm certainly not afraid of your power. You've made one very big mistake, and now you're going to pay for it." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Amanda knew that Jason was probably stewing in rage, trying to figure out what his next move would be. But she wasn't done yet. She wasn't just going to sit back and wait for him to strike. No, she had her own plans, and they didn't involve being anyone's victim. "You'll regret this," Jason finally said, his voice tight with barely contained fury. "You'll see. I always get what I want." Amanda didn't even flinch. "Not this time, Jason. This time, you've lost. And there's nothing you can do to change that." She hung up the phone, her mind already racing with her next steps. Jason might have connections, might have wealth, but she had something he didn't: the truth. She had the law on her side, and she had a team of professionals who were just waiting for the right moment to move in. It was only a matter of time before Jason's empire started to fall apart. She had seen it happen before. The powerful always thought they were untouchable, but eventually, they all made mistakes. And Jason Collins had just made his. Amanda stood still for a moment, letting the quiet of her apartment wash over her. She needed to stay focused. There was no time to waste. Jason wasn't the only one who had made a dangerous enemy. As she walked toward the small desk in the corner of her apartment, she pulled out a stack of files, documents, photographs, notes, all of it evidence that Jason had been hiding in plain sight for years. She had spent months compiling this information, piecing together a story that would eventually bring him down. Her fingers moved quickly as she sifted through the papers, each piece of evidence strengthening her resolve. She couldn't afford to let her guard down, not now. Jason was dangerous, but Amanda had learned how to handle dangerous people. She knew how to play the game, how to stay one step ahead. And that's exactly what she was going to do. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She froze for a moment, then stood up, walking cautiously toward the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the last thing she needed was a surprise visitor. She peered through the peephole, her breath catching when she saw who was standing on the other side. It was one of her contacts from the FBI. She opened the door quickly, letting him inside. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice low. The agent looked around, making sure no one was watching before speaking. "We've got a problem," he said, his face grim. "Jason's already making his move. He's not wasting any time. We need to act fast, or we're going to lose our chance to take him down for good." Amanda's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let it show. This was what she had been preparing for. "What do we need to do?" she asked, her voice sharp with determination. The agent handed her a file, the weight of it heavy in her hands. "This is everything we have on Jason's operations. We've been tracking him for months, but we need to move now before he destroys all the evidence. You're the one who's closest to him. You're the only one who can help us get the final pieces." Amanda nodded, her mind already racing. She knew what she had to do. Jason might think he had the upper hand, but he had no idea who he was dealing with. She was ready for whatever came next. The following morning, Amanda sat at her small kitchen table, the soft hum of the city just outside her window. Her mind was racing. The events of the previous day already a blur, replaced by the urgency of what she had to do next. She had set everything in motion. The evidence had been passed on to the FBI, and now it was just a matter of time. Jason Collins was making his move, but Amanda was prepared. She had anticipated this moment for months. As she sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Jason. It was one of her colleagues from the FBI, a familiar voice she trusted. "Amanda, we've got a problem," the agent said, the tone in his voice signaling trouble. "What kind of problem?" she replied, her mind immediately on high alert. "It's Jason. He's moved some of his operations out of state, and he's getting ready to cover his tracks. We're going to need more than just the evidence we have on file. We need you to dig deeper." Amanda set her cup down, her hand steady. She knew this was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. Jason had too much money, too many connections. If he could relocate his operations and destroy the evidence, it would be a massive setback. "How deep do you need me to go?" she asked, her voice firm. "As deep as you can, Amanda. We need you to get close again. He trusts you, and he won't see this coming. You'll have to act fast. We're counting on you to get us that final piece, the one that will take him down for good." She didn't hesitate. "I'm on it," Amanda said, the words coming naturally. She had been in this game long enough to know the risks. But she also knew the stakes. Jason had to be stopped. The FBI couldn't afford to let him slip through their fingers. She ended the call, took a deep breath, and stood up from the table. Her next move would require precision. She had to get to Jason before he could cover his tracks completely. The phone call had left her with a sense of urgency, but also determination. She had a target. Now it was time to bring the operation to the next level. Her mind flashed back to her first meeting with Jason. She remembered his cocky demeanor, his sense of invincibility. He had no idea who she really was. Amanda was not just the receptionist who took care of hotel bookings. She wasn't just the woman he thought he could manipulate. She was an FBI agent who had been living undercover, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to bring him down. Now that moment had arrived. She grabbed her bag and walked to the door, pausing for a moment before she left. The silence in her apartment was deafening, but Amanda embraced it. This was her time. She had the upper hand. As she stepped out into the hallway, she felt a familiar weight in her chest, a reminder of the responsibility she carried. She was doing this for justice, for the countless victims Jason had hurt, and for herself. Jason's empire was built on lies and manipulation, but Amanda was determined to tear it down, piece by piece. She had a plan, and she wasn't going to let anything or anyone stop her. She made her way to the elevator and descended to the parking garage, her thoughts focused on the task ahead. As she slid into her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Jason was getting desperate. He knew someone was closing in on him, and that made him more dangerous. But Amanda wasn't afraid. She had learned long ago that fear was just another obstacle to overcome. She pulled out of the garage and into the quiet streets of the city. The early morning traffic was light, and the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow over the skyline. It felt like the world was still, but Amanda knew better. Beneath the calm exterior, chaos was waiting to erupt. She arrived at her destination shortly, a nondescript office building in the heart of the city. As she parked, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from the FBI. The task force was in place. They had eyes on Jason, but it was up to Amanda to get the final piece. She looked at the address she had memorized, then turned her attention back to the building in front of her. This was it. She was about to walk into the lion's den. Amanda's heart beat faster, but her hands remained steady as she opened the door and walked inside. She had one job now, to find what Jason had hidden and make sure it would be the final nail in his coffin. The quiet hum of the building was almost too much. She had to focus. Every step she took brought her closer to Jason and closer to the end of this game. She moved swiftly through the corridors, keeping her eyes open for anything out of place. Amanda wasn't just looking for a piece of evidence. She was looking for the one thing that would change everything. She knew Jason was hiding something big, and she was going to find it before it was too late. As Amanda moved through the building, Her senses were heightened. Every hallway, every turn was an opportunity to find the final piece of the puzzle. Her footsteps echoed off the cold, sterile walls, but she didn't allow herself to get distracted. She had been in dangerous situations before, but this one felt different. Jason's empire was crumbling, but he wasn't the type to go down quietly. She knew that better than anyone. She took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself for what came next. The office she was heading toward belonged to Jason's right-hand man, a man who had been involved in the darker dealings of the company. Amanda had been tracking his movements for weeks, and now she was about to face him. She reached the door and paused for a moment, listening. The building was eerily quiet, but she could feel the tension in the air. With a steady hand, she pushed the door open, careful not to make a sound. Inside, the office was luxurious, filled with expensive furniture and framed certificates hanging on the walls. But Amanda's focus wasn't on the decor. She scanned the room, looking for anything that could lead her to the evidence she needed. The desk was cluttered with papers, but nothing seemed out of place. She moved around the room, her eyes narrowing as she studied every corner. It wasn't until she glanced at the filing cabinet that she saw it. A small, hidden drawer tucked beneath the desk. Her heart skipped a beat. She had found it. Amanda approached the desk slowly, her fingers grazing the drawer's edge. She pulled it open carefully, not wanting to alert anyone to her presence. Inside, she found a stack of documents, their contents just as she had hoped. These were the records Jason had been trying to keep hidden. They detailed the illegal transactions, the bribery, and the manipulation that had kept his business empire afloat for so long. Amanda's pulse quickened as she flipped through the pages, each one revealing more of Jason's twisted operations. But there was something else, something more personal. At the very bottom of the stack was a document marked with a familiar name. Amanda paused, her breath catching in her throat as she read the name on the paper. It was her name. Her jaw clenched as she realized what she was looking at. This document was a contract, one that Jason had signed years ago. It was an agreement that tied her to his operations in a way she hadn't known. She had been so focused on his illegal activities that she had never considered the depth of his involvement in her life. Amanda's mind raced as she processed the information. This was it. This was the leverage Jason had over her. It explained everything. The sudden interest in her background, the strange interactions, the way he had tried to manipulate her at every turn. He had been watching her all along, using her as a pawn in his game. But now, she had the upper hand. She didn't need Jason's leverage. She had the truth, and the truth was her weapon. She carefully folded the papers and tucked them into her bag, making sure everything was in order before she left the office. As she exited the building, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from the FBI. "We've got a lead on Jason's whereabouts. He's trying to escape, but we've got him cornered. We need you to move fast." Amanda's heart pounded as she read the message. This was it. Jason was making his final move, but she wasn't going to let him slip away. She was going to make sure he paid for everything he had done. She didn't hesitate. She knew exactly what she needed to do. She hopped into her car, her mind focused on the task ahead. She wasn't just an agent anymore. She was the one who was going to bring Jason Collins down for good. As she drove toward the location the FBI had given her, she couldn't help but think back to all the times Jason had underestimated her. He had thought she was just a small-town girl, someone who couldn't make a difference. But now, he was the one running scared. Amanda wasn't just fighting for justice. She was fighting for herself, for the woman she had become, for the power she had gained, and for the strength she had learned to harness. She was ready. The car sped through the streets, the city blurring around her as she moved toward the final confrontation. Amanda didn't know what awaited her at the end of the road, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't backing down. Jason had underestimated her once, but he wouldn't make that mistake again. She was about to finish what she had started, and nothing was going to stop her. She had come too far, and she wasn't going to let Jason's empire, or his lies, destroy everything she had worked for. This was her fight now, the final showdown, and Amanda was ready. As Amanda approached the abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, her heart was pounding in her chest. She had arrived at the location the FBI had provided, but something felt off. The streets were quiet, too quiet. The usual bustle of the city was absent, replaced by a heavy silence that weighed down on her. She parked her car a few blocks away, not wanting to draw attention, and stepped out into the cool evening air. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting a dark blue shadow over the street. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark and lifeless, as if it had been abandoned for years. Amanda's eyes scanned the surroundings, looking for any sign of movement. She had done this 100 times before, been in dangerous situations, faced down criminals, and walked into the unknown. But this time felt different. This time, she was about to confront the man who had tried to ruin her life, the man who had underestimated her at every turn. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. She wasn't just fighting for the truth now, she was fighting for herself. Amanda adjusted her jacket and made her way toward the entrance of the warehouse. The door was slightly ajar, as if inviting her inside. She pushed it open slowly, the creak of the metal hinges echoing. In the quiet, inside, the space was cavernous, filled with empty crates and dust-covered machinery. It looked like a place that had been abandoned for years, but Amanda knew better. This was where Jason had been hiding, where he had been making his final move to escape. She moved cautiously through the warehouse, her footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust on the floor. She had to be careful. Jason had too many resources, too many ways to slip through her fingers. But this time, he wasn't getting away. As she moved deeper into the building, Amanda's eyes were drawn to a faint light coming from the far end of the warehouse. It was dim, but it was enough to guide her. She moved toward it, her breath steady, her mind focused. Every muscle in her body was on high alert, ready for anything. She had been trained for moments like this. She knew how to handle herself, how to stay calm under pressure. But as she neared the source of the light, something inside her shifted. It wasn't fear, but something else, a sense of inevitability. She was about to end this. As she turned the corner, she saw him. Jason Collins stood in front of a large, wooden table, his back to her. He was speaking to someone on the phone, his voice low and urgent. For a moment, Amanda hesitated. She had him in her sights, but she didn't want to make a move too soon. She needed to be sure. She needed to hear what he was planning. Jason's voice was barely audible, but Amanda could make out a few words. Get everything out of here, make the switch, and get to the airport. I'll be there soon. Amanda's pulse quickened. He was trying to flee. He was making a run for it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She moved quickly, silently, her heart racing as she crept closer. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet, but Jason didn't seem to hear. She was only a few feet away when he suddenly turned around, his eyes locking onto hers. For a brief second, there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but it quickly turned into a smug grin. You shouldn't have come here, Amanda, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. You think you've won? You think you can stop me? Amanda stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. It's over, Jason. You're done. Jason's grin faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. He stepped back, reaching for something on the table. Amanda's instincts kicked in, and she lunged forward, tackling him to the ground before he could make a move. They crashed to the floor, the wind knocked out of Amanda as she pinned him down. Jason struggled beneath her, but she was stronger now. She had fought for this moment, and she wasn't going to let him slip away. You're finished, Amanda said, her voice steady as she restrained him. Your empire is falling apart, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Jason glared at her, his face red with fury. You don't know who you're messing with, he spat. I'll make sure you regret this. But Amanda didn't flinch. She had heard those threats before. They meant nothing now. You've already lost, Jason, she said, her grip tightening. It's over. Just then, the sound of sirens blared outside the warehouse. Jason's face drained of color as he realized what was happening. The FBI had arrived. They were closing in, and there was no way out. Amanda stood up, stepping back as the agents rushed in, guns drawn. Jason was quickly surrounded, his attempt at escape thwarted. As the agents took him into custody, Amanda couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. It was finally over. Jason Collins, the man who had tried to destroy her, was now behind bars. As the FBI agents led him away, Amanda took a deep breath. The weight that had been pressing down on her for so long was finally lifted. She had done it. She had taken down one of the most powerful men in the city, and she had done it on her terms. The aftermath of Jason's arrest was a blur, but Amanda couldn't shake the sense of finality that had settled over her. The next few days were filled with constant updates from the FBI, and each piece of information only confirmed what she had already known. Jason was done. His empire had crumbled, his criminal activities exposed, and he was facing charges that would ensure he never saw freedom again. Amanda had done it. She had brought him down, not through brute force, but through patience, intelligence, and strategy. The moment she had walked out of that warehouse, knowing the FBI had him in custody, was a turning point in her life. She had been fighting for so long, and now, at last, there was a sense of peace. But even in the quiet, Amanda couldn't forget the journey that had led her here. It wasn't just about bringing a criminal to justice. It was about her own transformation. She had started as someone who simply wanted to make a difference, someone who believed in right and wrong. But now, she was more than just a government agent. She had become a symbol of resilience, of strength, of the idea that no matter how far the odds seemed stacked against you, you could still win. The next morning, Amanda sat at her kitchen table, sipping her coffee as she reflected on the past few weeks. It was surreal. The chaos, the danger, the stakes, it all felt like a lifetime ago. She glanced at her phone, seeing a message from her FBI contact. The paperwork's almost done. It's over. You did it, Amanda. You're free to move forward. The words echoed in her mind. She had done it. She had dismantled a dangerous criminal operation, and now it was over. But even as she read the message, Amanda knew she couldn't simply walk away. She had been in this world for too long. Her work wasn't finished, not by a long shot. There would always be more work to do, more injustices to right, more people who needed help. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Amanda hesitated for a moment before answering. Amanda, it's Agent Harris, the voice on the other end said. I just wanted to thank you again. You were incredible in this case. We couldn't have done it without you. Amanda smiled, but there was no sense of satisfaction in her. Thanks, Harris. I just did what I had to do. The conversation moved on, with Harris updating her on the next steps in the case, but Amanda's thoughts were elsewhere. She had been a part of something much larger than herself. And while she didn't crave recognition, she couldn't deny the fact that her role in this case had made a real difference. We're going to need you for another assignment soon, Harris continued. But take some time. You've earned it. Amanda leaned back. In her chair, her eyes closed as she thought about the future. There was still more to do, more people who needed her skills, more challenges ahead. And as the silence of the morning surrounded her, she realized that she was ready. She had found her place in this world. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. She had sacrificed a lot to get here, but now, more than ever, Amanda understood the true value of her work. She wasn't just someone who followed orders. She was someone who changed the world, one case at a time. Amanda finished her coffee and stood up, a renewed sense of purpose settling over her. The past was behind her, but the future was bright. She had made it through the hardest part, and now, she was ready for whatever came next. She wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. Weeks had passed since Jason's arrest, but for Amanda, the weight of it all hadn't completely lifted. The case was closed, the paperwork filed, but there was still an unsettled feeling that lingered in the back of her mind. She had done what she set out to do, expose the truth and take down a dangerous man, but it wasn't the victory she had expected. The truth was, Amanda had changed over the course of this mission. She had become someone she didn't fully recognize, someone who could operate in the shadows, someone who could dismantle an empire from the inside out. But with that power came isolation, and the silence of her apartment at night reminded her of that. As the days passed, she tried to return to some sense of normalcy. She spent her evenings watching TV, cooking simple meals, but it never quite felt like home. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was still waiting for something. It wasn't until one afternoon, as she was returning to her car after a meeting with the FBI, that she received an unexpected call. The number on her phone wasn't familiar, but it was from the city, so she answered. Amanda, the voice on the other end said, I know it's been a while, but we need you. We've got another case, something you'll be perfect for. Amanda's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if it was the adrenaline or the realization that she hadn't expected this call so soon. But it felt like everything had come rushing back to her. What's the case? She asked, her voice steady but curious. The voice on the other end paused for a moment. We can't get into details over the phone, but it's big. Really big. We need someone who understands how to work with both the law and the underworld, someone who knows how to get the job done without anyone noticing. We need you, Amanda. She let the words sink in for a moment. The case was big, and it sounded dangerous. But she had spent her entire career preparing for moments like this. She had faced down powerful people before. She had outsmarted them. And now, she had the chance to do it again. I'm in, she said, her decision final. I'm ready for whatever you need. The voice on the other end let out a relieved sigh. Good. We'll send you the details soon. Get ready. This is going to be a challenge like you've never faced before. Amanda hung up the phone, her mind already working through the possibilities. Another case, another challenge. It was exactly what she needed. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of excitement. Real, raw, unrelenting excitement. She had been waiting for this. Waiting for something that would make her feel alive again. And now it was here. She was ready to dive back into the fight, to use everything she had learned to take down those who thought they were above the law. As she got in her car and started the engine, the hum of the engine was the only sound in the stillness of the afternoon. Her heart was racing, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something else, a sense of purpose that had been missing for far too long. She had a job to do, and this time, she was going to do it better than ever. As the city passed by her windows, Amanda couldn't help but think about how much she had changed. She was no longer just a woman doing a job. She was someone with power, someone who could bring down anyone, no matter how high they thought they were. She was no longer afraid of the dark. She had become part of it. But even as the adrenaline coursed through her veins, Amanda knew that the game was just beginning. This new case wouldn't be like the last. She could feel it. The challenges ahead would be bigger, the stakes higher. And as much as she had prepared for this moment, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get even more complicated. The world she had stepped into was one of shadows, one where loyalty could be bought and sold, where trust was a luxury few could afford. But Amanda wasn't afraid of the darkness anymore. She was ready to face it head on. And this time, no one was going to stop her. As she drove toward the unknown, Amanda couldn't help but smile. She had come too far to turn back now. The road ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure. She would be ready. The game had changed, and so had she. The next few days were a whirlwind for Amanda. She was fully immersed in the new case, working alongside her colleagues at the FBI. The details were still vague, but the feeling that something big was on the horizon never left her. As she sat at her desk, surrounded by stacks of documents and digital files, the reality of her work began to sink in. This was different from everything she had done before. It wasn't just about tracking down criminals. It wasn't just about getting the bad guys. This case felt personal. She had learned that there were layers to the world she had stepped into, and not all of them were visible on the surface. As she worked late into the night, Amanda found herself staring at a file that had been on her desk for hours. It was a report on an underground network, one that reached deep into the city's most powerful circles. It was clear that Jason Collins wasn't the only player in this game. This was bigger, much bigger. Amanda's mind raced as she scanned the report. The network was vast, with members in key positions, and the corruption went beyond just money. There were people involved who were untouchable, people who thought they were beyond the reach of the law. Amanda knew that this was no longer just a job. It was a mission. She couldn't just bring down one man. She had to dismantle the entire system. The next morning, she met with her team. The plan was clear: gather intel, make connections, and uncover the masterminds behind the operation. The work would be slow, meticulous, and dangerous. Amanda had always been ready for danger, but now, it felt different. This wasn't about one criminal. It was about a network that had been operating for years, right under their noses. As Amanda spoke with her colleagues, laying out the strategy, she felt a sense of determination she hadn't experienced in a long time. There was no turning back. This was what she was meant to do. Later that day, Amanda found herself in a dark alley, waiting for an informant who had promised crucial information. The city felt alive around her, but in this moment, she was alone, focused solely on the task ahead. As she glanced around, she thought about how far she had come. She had gone from being a quiet hotel receptionist to being at the heart of a high-stakes operation. The transformation had been gradual, but now she was standing at the edge of something much bigger than herself. The informant finally arrived, his face hidden beneath the brim of a worn cap. He handed Amanda a small envelope, his hands shaking slightly. "This is all I have," he said, his voice low and urgent. "But you need to be careful. They're everywhere." and they know what you're after. Amanda nodded, tucking the envelope into her coat pocket. I'll be fine, she replied, though she knew the danger was only just beginning. As the informant disappeared into the shadows, Amanda felt the weight of the envelope in her pocket, and with it, the burden of the truth that was about to be revealed. She knew this would be the beginning of the end for the network, but she also knew that it wouldn't be easy. It never was. Over the next few days, Amanda and her team pieced together the information they had gathered. The network was more intricate than they had imagined. It wasn't just about illegal activities, it was about power. And the people involved weren't just criminals, they were people with influence, people who controlled everything. As Amanda sat in the briefing room, staring at the map covered in pins and connections, she felt a sense of urgency. They were getting closer, but they weren't there yet. She needed one more piece of the puzzle. One last breakthrough. The phone rang, breaking her thoughts. Amanda, the voice on the other end was familiar, one she hadn't expected to hear. It was Agent Harris. We've got a lead. A big one. It's time to move. Amanda's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The moment they had been working toward had finally arrived. She grabbed her things and headed for the door, her mind focused on the next steps. The game had changed. The network was about to be exposed, and Jason Collins' involvement was only the beginning. As Amanda made her way to the car, she realized how much she had grown since the day she had first walked into this world. She wasn't just a part of the system anymore. She had become a force within it. And now, it was her turn to change everything. She was ready for whatever came next. The city rushed by as she drove toward the next stage of the operation. Amanda could feel the tension building, but she didn't allow herself to get distracted. This was her moment. She had worked too hard, fought too long, to let anything stand in her way now. And as the sirens blared in the distance, Amanda knew that her journey was far from over. She had started something that would change everything, and no matter what came next, she was ready to see it through.